All right, so today what we're going to be doing is practicing some of the technology enhanced items and SOL stuff that you have. So you picked up the warm up, and what I'd like you to do on your computer is find this TestNav symbol here. And you were supposed to have in your TA run like a health check and make sure, so we need to make sure that your computers are ready for your SOL. So you're taking your SOLs on your computers. And the SOL schedule has you taking them in a regular classroom. So instead of going to some of you may be scheduled for the lecture hall, but most of you will be taking your SOLs in regular classrooms. So you want to make sure you show up each day with your computer fully charged, and you want to make sure that you have access to this TestNav, and that'll just make it easier. I don't know if you've ever had that frustrating experience of where you're ready to go for your test and it won't load, or so having your computer ready to go that day will certainly make it easier for you. All right, so double clicking on the TestNav item. The directions are a little bit off on the paper. Did everybody pick up a warm-up? Make sure you have that, because that's the paper that I'm referencing and talking about. So you do not need to, when you're taking your SOL, you'll actually sign in with a username and a password. We're not going to do that. You're going to go down to these Virginia practice items. So you're not going to log in. Do you see where my cursor is down here? Virginia practice items is what you're going to click. Now you have the ability to practice for all of your SOLs. So if your science teacher hasn't shown you this yet, or your history, so you have the ability to practice all of them. We're going to stick with mathematics, and we're going to go down and choose geometry. And then you're going to choose the 2016 standards of learning, and we're going to do the non-audio. Am I going too fast? So there's 36 questions in this practice, and you're going to go ahead and start. You agree to those terms and conditions, and then you continue, and then you have to start again. So to me, it's fairly logical, but we want to make sure that everyone ends up. If you're having a hard time, you can go ahead and let me know. I want you working with a partner. I want you talking. I want you figuring these out. On the whole, this is much harder than the actual SOL. So I want you to imagine that they took all of the hard ones and they put them together to give you practice. So don't be upset if you feel like that this is a little harder than what you're used to. That's fine. But our purpose of today is dual purposes. Number one, to get you used to the computer. So take a minute and look at all the resources you have. Up here is where you have access to the Desmos graphing calculator. In case you forgot how to use that, play with that today, and make sure that you understand where the functions are and the buttons and whatnot. Number two, you have access to the straight edge, and I want you to play with it when appropriate. You have a centimeter ruler, an inch ruler, that whole answer eliminator, a pointer. On several of the questions, a compass is also available, and I definitely want you playing with the compass. So hold on a minute and let me just scoot through and find the one. See how you have these tools here also? So I want you to be able to go to the compass. And the compass is kind of cool. So this button here moves the compass around. This button here stretches the compass and shrinks it. And then this button here draws along that arc. So make sure that you play with that so you're confident on what it is that you're doing. You also have the writing tool. You can erase and play with all these different tools that are available to you. Olivia, you had a question.
Will the graphic calculator be on here or the science board?
So this is the graphing calculator that you have access to for Desmos. If you want to make it bigger, you can. And then you have that ability. It should be exactly what you're used to seeing, where you can click down here and have all your functions.
Would that be an actual SOL?
Yeah.
Or, okay.
So this whole thing models what you're going to have at for SOL time.
Okay.
You will also get a TI graphing calculator when you take your SOL. Go ahead.
Are there like sections that you can use a calculator with and sections that you can't use?
No, you have access to the calculator for the whole test. Keep asking. What's on your mind? Ask. Go.
Are these like half? You don't have this many questions on the.
So the SOL always comes with about 10 sample test questions. So I think you'd be looking at 50 and 40 of them count.
Okay.
If memory serves, it's either 50 and 40 or 60 and 50, and I think I'm going to go with 50 and 40.
And most of the SOLs are pretty general, or.
So SOL stands for Standard of Learning. That means it's the very bottom basic. Like, we cannot in good conscience say that you passed geometry without having these skills that you're carrying along with you. So over the years, they've made the SOLs a little bit more rigorous than what they used to in the past. So they're a little bit harder to pass than they were in years past. But an honors student sitting in an honors class and passing an honors class should have no problem with the SOL. Your goal as an honors student should be to hit pass advance. And I don't want you to be upset with yourself if that's not a reality. Did I already talk about this scale with you? So if you check out and look at this scale here, we're used to grades on the 10% scale, 190, 80, blah, 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 blah. We have a 50% floor now in Fairfax County, and this 64.5, 64.5 is the very bottom D that you can get. Everything below 64.5
Retail?
is an F. Okay, so basically that equates to a 400. So all you need to do is pass this thing. So it's not a problem. So you can pass it with a 400, a 401, 402, whatever. If you want to pass advanced, you have to get a 500. Now what's interesting is kids think that there's 100 points between each of them. Not so much. It's not proportional. Those 100 points between a pass and pass advanced is really only 10% points. Does that make sense? So if you want to pass advanced, you guys get a 90. You got to get 90% of them right. And then the 80, 70. So there's, almost 25 points here in the same area where there's 10. Do you see how that's disproportionate? When I first started giving the SOL and the test, we could say if you get 1 wrong, this is your score, 2 wrong, this is your score, 3 wrong, this is your score. But in recent years, they've changed that. Now, different questions have different weightings. And so not only are the questions weighted by easier and medium and more difficult, but they're also then normalized across every single kid that takes the test in the state of Virginia. So the minute that you press submit on your test, your answers to each of your individual questions are compared and normalized with all of the other students across the entire state who also take the same test. Not just the school, but the county and the state. And for that reason, kids get really weird scores. Like somebody might have a 592 and somebody else has a 591. And you're like, okay, that's weird. How did that just happen between the two? I've had kids get them all right and not get a 600 because of the rounding through normalizing rounds down. So they'll get like a 599. And I'm like, but you didn't get any wrong, but that's because of rounding and the percentages that they do across the state. So with increased technology, we end up having something that's a little bit harder to track down.
Will the test be generates questions based on your brightness?
No, so that's what you had when you took your Math 8 or your 7th grade SOLs. It was called a computer adapted test or CAT test. And that's one, those kinds of tests are, if you get it right, they give you a little bit of a harder question. If you get it wrong, they give you a little bit of an easier question to find your level. Those tests are frustrating to take because you can't backtrack, you can't skip. This is not one of those. So you can mark a question for review, you can finish the test, you can come back, you change the answer, not a problem. Keep asking questions, they're all good ones.
You can use the back button on the SO, right?
Yes, so you can backtrack, you can eliminate, you can, highlight, you can play with the tools. So there are proofs, and there's an example of what some of the proofs look like on this, where they'll give the proof and you have to fill in whatever justification or statement, but it's not like a free form writing thing.
Okay.
See what I mean? Alright, so the purpose of today, like I said, is twofold. Number one, get you used to the computer and the tools and the calculator and all that kind of stuff. Number two, review. So some of these questions are a little bit tricky. You learn more when you talk and share with a friend, when you collaborate and work together. If that friendship is not one that you are able to stay on track with or stay on task with, then you can look at that person and be like, dude, let's catch up at lunch because I really want to review and make the most of my 90 minutes. You should be able to pass the SOL with minimal studying. So if you make the most of the time that we give you in class and you ask questions, then what work you have to do outside of the class, minimal. Do you understand what I'm saying? So make the most of this time that I give you now. So what I'm hoping for in our next 45 minutes up until lunch is it's just that nice academic buzz where I hear everybody working and talking and thinking and sharing and, oh, where did you get that? Or I wasn't sure about that, or can you explain that to me? That kind of language is what I like to hear. The most frustrating thing about this is you enter in your answers and you go on to the next, enter, and then you hit submit and it's like, thank you. And it doesn't tell you which ones you got right or wrong. For that reason, we created a template of answers so that you can fill down your answers and then we'll have a key that you can check. So that's the purpose of this worksheet. If it's not enough room for you to do your work on, there's plenty of scratch paper and you can go ahead and do that.
Will we do more of these or something like?
We're gonna do a couple of different kinds of reviews. This is the only one of this type we're doing.
Do you have to put the answers also on this, or can you just put it on this?
You can just put it on the paper because you can advance to the next one without filling in an answer and it's not gonna tell you whether you're right or wrong. Anything else? All right, have fun.